which video game franchise should be revived? Well, I remember a mission where you had to protect a journalist as he reported on the fighting. As the mission came to the final objective, to escort him out of the area, the NPC and we're running back to the vehicle when a helicopter got destroyed and its burning wreckage landed directly on the NPC's head. Years after playing that game, I still remember the WTF that went through my head and then the laughter that followed. So much fun was had in that open world. I loved the first game and it did languages better than any game I've played since. You could pick one of 3 starting characters, each of whom spoke English and one other language, Korean, Mandarin, and Vietnamese, if I remember correctly. Lots of NPCs actually spoke their appropriate languages, and you'd only get subtitles if you'd pick the character who spoke their language. Really cool and immersive. Discovering Dark Cloud 2 completely blew my mind with how much content it had. It's insane that nobody has tried to copy the formula with modern technology. Lots of modern crafting, dungeon diving games are similar, but it's like ... DC2 is still the better game even after all these years. Challenging dungeons, crafting, photography, fishing, golf, a full-fledged city builder with customization, fun storyline and cutscenes. Time travel, good graphics for the time, plus other things that I'm sure I forgot. Just listing them out loud I'm like holy crap, that game was amazing. Other comments have touched on these, but I'll add a little. RCT2 with OpenWRT 2, best PC option for original RCT. GOG sells the first 2 OG Roller Coaster Tycoons. They can be had for quite cheap when on sale. RCT on GOG, RCT2 on GOG. If you just want to play RCT, buy one or both, and then go get OpenWRT 2, which is an open-source implementation of RCT2 with new features, bug fixes, etc. OpenWRT 2, RCT Classic, best mobile option. If you want to play on mobile, Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic is a very good mobile port of RCT and RCT2. Touch controls work well, all scenarios are included, and it's great to play on a tablet while traveling. Apple App Store, Google App Store, Amazon App Store, PC version on Steam. The Steam version on PC works quite well, too. I'd recommend OpenWRT 2 over the Steam version, but the Steam version still has a lot of call fixes and is a very credible implementation. My only complaint is that properly placing things where you want can be a bit of a pain. It's a minor quibble, but it's one of the reasons I recommend OpenWRT 2 if you're playing on PC. Parkitect and Planet Coaster. Now on to the successors. There are 2 main, for example actually good, stay away from RCT World, spiritual successors to classic RCT. Both are good in their own right, and they fill different, complementary niches. Parkitect, Planet Coaster. Parkitect is probably closer and truer to RCT in that it's top-down and is more focused as a management sim. You can still make gorgeous rides and parks, but you'll also need to consider things like how to efficiently remove trash while hiding the more utilitarian elements of your park. Planet Coaster is much more for those of you who want a coaster or park-making sandbox. Management sim aspects are there, but there isn't much depth, and you'll be disappointed if you expect too much. On the other hand, those of you who are creative savants can build some insane rides and parks that are beyond gorgeous. Even if you're not a creative genius yourself, the Steam Workshop integration makes it very easy to bring in other people's creations into your own parks. What I loved about SSX3 was the sheer absurd Uber system and points that you would accumulate. It was addicting trying to fit in the most spins, rotations or tricks to get super uber, like that feeling of just pure momentum and power from getting all your tricks lined up one after the other was chef's kiss. Aside from that, it had a super deep customization system for a game like this with stats and cosmetics and various playable characters. Really great to be able to unlock mountains but then upgrade your character to take it on, whether you spin fast or handle better. My only fear is that, being an EA title, There is no doubt in my mind it would never come back the way we'd imagine. You're going to get microtransactions out the ass for things like cosmetics or even stats. God forbid you introduce loot boxes into the franchise. They've made several, but they all strayed so far from what worked in Star Fox 64. I am still so mad about the Star Fox game for Wii U. It's perfect, honestly perfect, everything I ever wanted. And they made the controls completely unplayable. You drive on the TV but you aim on the tablet, splitting your attention between both and neither one is fun. Can't see where you're shooting on the TV and can't see where you're driving on the tablet. And the frustrating part is that it's so great, but I can't play it. Imagine if they released Elder Scrolls V with the controls of co-op. That's how it feels to play Star Fox Zero. It's a simple concept, just a rail shooter, and I don't know why they can't do that. If this doesn't happen in the next few years, then Konami is just leaving money on the table. The last few Resident Evil games, of which 7 and 8 bear some definite PT inspiration, prove that AAA horror games can be successful and massively lauded. And considering the fact that SH and RE are basically the two Titan AUG horror franchises, I'd think developers would want to pick up the gauntlet that Capcom has essentially thrown down. Infamous is such a console seller for me. I'd like to have a PS5, but I haven't been too broken up about it yet because there aren't many PS5 exclusives that I feel like I'm missing out on. But if a new Infamous game comes, I'll be watching those PS5 drops like a hawk. But also, I really just want an Infamous Collection release on Steam. Would love to play through 1 and 2 again, but I sold my PS 3 years ago assuming they would eventually be ported over, and then it never happened. I need another Infamous game. I'm happy for Sucker Punch and their creation of GOT, but I'm begging for their next focus to be on Infamous. I go back and play the first 2 all the time. Even Second Such brings a weird nostalgia to me. First Light is so incredible on its own. Dude, I was so heartbroken to see them not have a new game ready for the PS5. I knew they still were probably focused on GOT, but I thought maybe they would at least show they had a plan for a new installment. But nothing. I'm not saying they won't in the future, but I'm saying it's been so long that I've been deprived. I think it's my favorite video game series in my favorite fictional world. I've been saying this for years. Change the setting from a small private school to a big public school in the suburbs. Expand the social cliques feature beyond just preps, nerds, and jocks. Bring in the punks, goths, rednecks, skaters, stoners, rich kids, etc. One of the coolest features of the original game was how literally every student had a personality and unique features and an in-game opinion on you which you could influence. Keep that. Multiply it by 100. Your player character is a new kid, a troubled orphan living in a group home. You get to keep the strict curfew game mechanic, and the walled garden safe house structure. The map is a busy suburban corridor surrounded by seemingly endless cul-de-sac neighborhoods in various states of decay. There's weird Easter eggs in the surrounding woods. The player tries to get through their classes and navigate the complicated social strata, ultimately falling in with the wrong crowd. I would love another proper Burnout. Burnout 3 was, without question, the best racing game on the PS2, and 4, Dominator and Paradise were also all very solid titles. But EA just decided to move the Burnout developers onto the Need for Speed series. After all, why have 2 different arcade street racers, right? And sure, some of the titles Criterion made for the series, such as Hot Pursuit, were well received. It's just not the same. Need for Speed is what happens when a game publisher watches a bunch of car modders doing donuts in a Tesco car park, after watching a Fast and Furious movie and tries to replicate it in video game form. Yes, mechanically it's similar to Burnout, but all of the aesthetics are different. Need for Speed was baked into real-world cars and modding, along with some R&B/hip-hop/grime/dubstep, and a bunch of dodgy 20-somethings evading the cops because family or whatever. Burnout was not that. Burnout was pure arcade fun. There was no story, There was no effort to capture an aesthetic or pander to a subculture like Need for Speed. Burnout just had a rock soundtrack and wanted you to have fun. There were no characters, no story, no real-world cars or worrying about car specs or customization. It was just purely here's the car, head for the road, here's your opponents, turn the radio up and enjoy. In case you don't know, there is a bunch of great spiritual successors to the Must series, such as, basically every Must sequel, and there is spin-off, Abduction, by the same creators, and the upcoming Firmament, Quern, Undying Thoughts, probably the most Must-like game not made by Cyan Worlds, The Witness, Outer Wilds, The Telos Principle, added the last two games which I had forgotten. Chrome Mounts. It was an awesome Xbox 360-era mech game where you would custom build your mech and then have team battles. You could play anything from quick scout meshes, super heavy gun platforms, or a commander mech with a radar dish that let your team talk with each other without having to capture a communication tower, and each had their role in team fights. There were 3 factions, each with their own style of meshes and new equipment being researched every so often, and their borders changed daily depending on which faction was winning more battles. There were a lot of neat concepts and the gameplay was solid, and I'd love to see a sequel. I'd be very surprised if it came out in 2025. It's only in very early stages. ATM and Bethesda said real work on it won't start until Starfield is finished. So even if Starfield meets its goal date, I never trust release dates until they happen. That means we still have another year of development on that before they even start TS6, and I highly doubt they can release it in less than 3 years of development. I'd love to be wrong though. From 1994 to 2011, 17 years, Bethesda released 5 games on 4 different generations of hardware. From 2011 to 2021, 10 years, Bethesda have released 9 editions of one game across 6 platforms. If we assumed 6 won't be released until 2025 at the very earliest due to Starfield development, then it's going to get pretty close to being further away from Skyrim than Skyrim is from the launch of the first Elder Scrolls, and MS fucking DOS game that predates the PlayStation and N64. I'd like to think it's an outside chance, but it is absolutely possible. Even so, it shouldn't even be this close. The Shadow of Mordor games. The second got hamstrung by shitty balancing to encourage microtransactions. Thankfully that's gone by this point, so you can enjoy the game freely without them. As a result, the launch was met with a pretty middling reception, which is a shame because outside of the scummy microtransactions it was better than the original in pretty much every way. We'll probably never get a third game thanks to the wet fart that was 2's reception. Jade Empire is an underappreciated gem from BioWare's golden age. It had a great story that's largely affected by your decisions with the karma system, open palm, closed fist. It had martial arts-based combat with multiple hand-to-hand and weapon styles to learn, even secret unlockable ones. Lots of those nice little secret interactions, side quests to find by searching every corner of the game. It multiple romance options. Even a gay arch from a time where not a lot of games let you do that. You could even convince 2 characters to agree to a love triangle with you if you play your cards right. You could call it BioWare's Fable, but that doesn't do it total justice. Conflict Global Storm. I played this when I was about 7, 8 years old. My all-time favorite. There was another game, Conflict Desert Storm. I had no idea if this was a sequel or a prequel or even related to the game, but at the time I thought it must have been the second one to it. I borrowed it from my cousin one time and carried in my hands with pure joy on the train home. Got off the train and sat in the station realizing I'd left it. Whoever picked that up, I hope you enjoyed the game I never got to play. X-Wing. Why LucasArts left all that money on the table is fucking beyond my understanding. People just want to do the trench run, update it, and just cash the checks. Destruction Derby. It's just plain fun. And I had 2 pitches for new games. One was shot down in the 90s for being too imitable in real life. Board fighter. You just smack each other with different boards. Of course, then Grand Theft Auto came out where you could beat a prostitute and steal back your money. Not imitable at all. Shitbox racing. Exactly what it sounds like. Pintos. Gremlins. Old Lincolns. 60s to 80s beater cars. Slow and stupid. Anyone wants those ideas, fucking go for it. I mean, the only way the series will be fixed is if a game that has lots of things that made the old ones good sells really well, while one of the newer entries completely flops and consumers cite the oversimplification of the game as the main reason why they didn't buy. On an unrelated note, the re-release of Diamond and Pearl bring back a game full of highly explorable areas and lots of complexity and branching pathways to the world is coming out soon, as is Legends Arceus, which looks to be built from the same engine of the lackluster Sword and Shield. If one of these was a massive flop, it would highlight what type of game consumers preferred. At this stage, it almost feels like they're just gonna make it into basically GTA Online style stuff only from now on. It's fucking stupid that you're encouraged to use microtransactions to get in-game currency to buy cars in a game called Grand Theft Auto Online. I would love to see a modern game in the same style as the 3D games like 4v, but without the scumminess of Rockstar and Take-Two, as in both how they treat their customers and their employees, since from what I know, crunch is still commonplace, though I'd love to be proven wrong about that. The Savage franchise, an extremely unique set of games, with beasts versus humans in an asymmetrical battle that was surprisingly well balanced. It was essentially an RTS, with the commanders placing buildings and structures to increase resource generation and defenses while protecting their base. However, the units were players, playing something like a 3D MOBA. The battles could be huge, with matches of up to 50 I think, players in 25 versus 25 combat, but it could be scaled down as well. For an easier competitive scene, the commanders gave orders to their players, pinged locations and strategies, demanded vision in certain areas. A good commander would allow his team to absolutely destroy the opposition through strategy, while relying on the skills of his players for the individual battles. A good player could easily take on 5 others and win, being a huge asset for their commander. Map control would reward the players with new units, some that specialized in sieges and building destruction, others that specialized in PvP combat, or even scouting units that could place vision and stealth. When a player died, they would respawn with a unit of their choice. If esports had blown up when Savage 1 or 2 were in full bloom, I guarantee they would have overtaken League of Legends as the most fun to watch game. Every game has died within a year or two, because the company in charge never fixed basic issues and essentially gave up on their game as soon as it was released. Truly tragic. As I understand it, Overload is to Descent but Planet Coaster is to Roller Coaster Tycoon. One studio had the original developers, the other had the trademark, and they released competing products at the same time. The difference is that Planet Coaster is still kinda active, while both Overload and Descent Underground died off. Frown. Edit. Also, I backed the Overload Kickstarter. Note: a franchise, as it's only one game, but Nintendo released a game for the Famicom Disk System called The Mysterious Murasame Castle. It was sort of a sister game to The Legend of Zelda, as it was developed at around the same time and built on the same engine, but it's much more action-oriented. It didn't leave Japan at the time and never got a sequel, but the game hero, Takamaru, has appeared in other games like Smash 4 and Ultimate, obviously, Nintendo Land, Samurai Warriors, and most recently, Mario Maker 2. The game was made available to the world on the 3DS Virtual Console and quickly became one of my favorite 8-bits games. I would absolutely love to see a modern Takamaru game. Brute Force Crimson Skies Splinter Cell Roller Coaster Tycoon Star Wars Coder Fable Battlefield Bad Company Kingdoms of Amalur Operation Flashpoint Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth. Reminded of this after making my comment below. Probably an unpopular opinion. Movie Titans. The Spider-Man games based off of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man were really fun, and so were the Lord of the Rings games. Obviously, with movie tie-ins you're more likely to get more whiners than winners, but there are still some diamonds among the rough. Mario, just hear me out, a fully expansive, free roam storyline RPG. In a Mario universe, you can be whoever you want. You can do whatever you want. The world is filled with quests ranging from working for the kart manufacturers to help build your own kart, to racing for the world championship. From saving a small town princess from the local castle, to taking on Bowser into the biggest castle in the game. You have currency, you can buy things, your character upgrades, you have character class customization, Easter eggs are all over, and there is some multiplayer aspect, and it's all in first, third person.